guys, this is my hip mobility drill. You can do this daily, ideally just get it done as often as you possibly can. It's great to do before a strength session if you're doing squats, lunges, deadlifts. Almost everybody has limited hip mobility unless you're some sort of gymnast or if you're really working on this all the time, maybe. But I mean, this is something that is very, very useful to many people who want to increase their movement capability and flexibility. So all right, let's get into it. We're going to start on our backs in a figure 4 position. Now most of these positions, what we're going to do is we're going to move dynamically within the range of motion that we have and kind of try and expand that range of motion a little bit, and then we're going to hold a static stretch. So for this one, I am in this figure 4 position and I'm just kind of pushing, and I can literally push with my hand. I'm just pushing this knee away to try and stretch my hips a little bit. Now once I've got sort of 10 reps, then I'm going to hold, I'm going to pull this knee in a little and I'm going to push away and I'm going to hold for 60 seconds. And that is going to be more or less the standard of what we're going to do with each of the different movements. So we do 10 or 15 little mobility movements and then a static stretch. And I really believe that doing a combination of static and dynamic movements is the key to being able to increase mobility. Okay, movement number 2 is folding the left knee over the right and then trying to bring that left knee as close as we can to the right shoulder. Now again, we're going to do 10 to 15 dynamic movements here. You can assist it with your arm if you like, or you can just do it with your lower body. What I'm doing is rocking my hips over towards the right. Doesn't matter if your lumbar spine comes off the ground, that's probably going to happen, but we're just going to rotate this big twisting movement. We're going to feel it on the outside of our hip here. And I feel a little bit of a twinge in my left hip there as well. So once we've done about 10 or 15 movements, then we're going to go into a static stretch. So we stop moving, but we'll try and push into that new range of motion. Next is a butterfly. So pretty standard, old school hip mobility. We're going to keep our feet nice and close together, hands behind you, and depending on where you're at with your mobility, you'll either be leaning forward or back, just wherever you're comfortable. What we're going to do with our dynamic range here is pull down with our knees. So trying to pull our knees towards the floor. 4, 5. We're going to go up to about 15. 10. So you really feel it on the inside of the hips here. Trying to really force those feet together. Once we've got 15 dynamic movements, then we can pinch our toes, keep our chest up and open, and lean into those hips. Still pulling the knees down towards the floor, and we hold that for 1 minute. Next we have our frog stretch. So we're going to go into a wide frog position here, and our ankles are roughly in line with our knees. And what we're going to do is rock back into that position 10 or 15 times. So once we've got 10 or 15 dynamic movements, then we can go into a static movement, and to do that I generally come down to the floor and I try to push back. Keep breathing and I hold for a minute. Okay, Instep Stretch is the next one. We're going to come into this half kneeling position, and what we want to do is get this knee quite far back, so it's not going to work if the knee's here, you won't feel much. So we're going to get nice and low, we're going to push that knee right back to start off with. Now, I just keep one hand on my knee and I just drive my hips towards the ground now. Now you'll feel a stretch up the front of the quad, all throughout the hips, hip flexors, you'll feel those engaging. So, driving towards the ground, 10 or 15 dynamic movements, and then we hold for 1 minute. For a little more advanced version of the Instep stretch, we can go into the couch stretch, which is more quad dominant. It's called couch stretch because you can do it very easily at home up against the couch. Anything like a wall or something you can force against that's going to give you some resistance to push this leg back against. So here we want to ideally come into a much more upright position. So the further that I come upright, keeping nice and tall through the chest, the greater I'm going to feel that stretch in the quadricep. So for our dynamic mobility drill, we can push back into a more upright position 10 or 15 times. Breathing out as we come further back. Once we've got our 10 or 15 dynamic movements, then we're going to hold for 60 seconds. Next we have the pigeon stretch. So this position is about working into the pigeon stretch. So we're going to roll this hip over gradually for our dynamic movements in this direction. So what we want is a right angle in this front knee. We're going to rotate the hips in this direction. And the idea is that we want to eventually be able to get those hips squared and come down into the pigeon stretch. You can do a modified version of this by pulling the ankle in. That's going to allow you to get into a modified pigeon stretch, which I'll show you in a second. But ideally, you want to be working, to get the greatest benefit, you want to be working with that right angle in the knee from day one. So once we've got 10 or 15 rotations, then we can sink into our pigeon stretch. So if we want to do a modified version, like I said, you can pull that in, then you'll find that when we roll this hip over to get it nice and square, then we're able to get into this position where we can get down nice and low in your standard pigeon. So the idea is to get those hips as low to the ground and whilst keeping that right angle. So that is a pigeon stretch. Final move in your hip mobility arsenal is a Cossack squat. Now we're going to start with an easier version and then move on to the advanced one. Now for the easy version you want a small stool. I use a med ball. It's perfect for it, and we're going to take a wide squat here. Now first thing we want to do is to squeeze in with the knees and out with the elbows. So when we're doing that, we want to try and bring the knees in using our muscles, and then we're going to force out against that with our elbows, and in this prayer position we push out against the knees. So we want to do that 10 or 15 times. Then we're going to go into an internal rotation on the ball. So what we're trying to do is to keep the heel and toe on the ground and internally rotate that knee until it comes down to the ground. Now sitting on the ball, this takes a lot of the intensity and the body weight, your body weight, out of the movement. So it's a really nice safe way to start getting into that internal rotation movement. And doing it on the med ball is really comfortable because it's nice and soft and it moves with your butt, where if you do it on a stool it kind of hurts. So if you can get a hold of a med ball, for this, that's a great option. Now for the more advanced, get rid of that socket, and we come down into a regular squat. Now we're going to do the same thing here, rotating inwards with that knee. It's very important to keep the heel on the ground. So a common error here is to see that where the heel comes up. You'll still get a little bit of hip rotation and you'll feel it, but what we want to be able to do is control that movement, keeping the weight going through the heel. So for that to happen, the heel's got to be on the ground. So that is your Cossack squat, and that is our hip mobility drill. Like I said, the more often you do it, the better. And it'll take about 15-20 minutes to do it properly, but I really recommend just hitting it every day, like 5 minutes or so when you get up in the morning or pre-workout. It's our hip mobility drill.